Hello everyone, this is Vikram Prakash and you are listening to Architecture Talk. Each episode we continue to bring to you a series of conversations that are not only cross-disciplinary, but hopefully they advance the frontier of architectural thinking for you in interesting and stimulating ways. Today I am talking to Aaron Bourget, who is a filmmaker who I met at a recent short movie film festival here in Walla Walla, Washington. But the amazing thing about Aaron is that he is, although a complete amateur, a prolific filmmaker, having made hundreds of films, and he works with a simple dictum. If you have an idea, you can convert it into a film, however long it is and however little time it takes using the technology at hand. And he makes films that are done within a few hours to maximum within a week. So I was fascinated by his construction process, his making process, and I asked him about that and all his thinking about working in the creative medium here in Seattle, Washington. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Next week, we will be back again with my second part 2 conversation with Mariam Kamra. Looking forward to it all. Here we go.
Architecture is really the art and science of turning fiction into fact.
Sometimes kind of real architectural life interferes with intellectual architectural life.
There is no such thing as architecture.
Welcome to Architecture Talk.
Thanks
Aaron.
for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I was so enjoyed meeting you in Walla Walla
Yeah, me too.
at this crazy film festival.
Sure. The
Walla-
best film festival in the United States as far as I'm concerned.
That's right. The
Yeah.
short form film festival
Right.
organized by Warren Etheridge and Nancy Dragon.
Right. The Walla Walla Movie Crush. Yeah.
Movie Crush. That's right.
That's right.
Movie Crush.
Yeah.
And where you were one of the featured, yet again, one
Yeah.
of the featured filmmakers.
Yeah, I think I've been there every year with everything again.
Yeah. They've been there with all their festivals.
Right.
And I was so intrigued that when Warren was introducing you on stage, he said, well, Aaron produces films at a furious rate.
That's right. I think so. Yeah.
That was fascinating to me. So just start things off for us. How many films do you make upon average? I don't know.
Well, the average is picked up now in the pandemic years because work has been lean, so there's more time for the art there. But I think I usually make about 50 short films a year, and usually half of that's for work and half of it's for art, but it's almost all been art for the last couple of years. So
Okay.
yeah.
Half for work means you make short films for places like Seattle Art Museum and
Oh
things
yeah,
like-
yeah.
Just,
Arts organizations there, or mostly nonprofits, some fundraising videos. Things
Okay,
like that.
so those are sort of, we've seen those sort
Sure.
of commercial. They're intended to put out the good picture.
Yeah, it is. I try definitely to make my films not look like a pharmaceutical advertisement.
Right.
So none of the slow motion, soft focus things. It's really just really candid, and I think it works out better that way, because I think when people go to a fundraising thing, the last thing they want to do is see another commercial.
Right.
So if they see something and it looks like the place they know and it looks like the people they know,
Yeah.
then I think it seems more honest that way.
That's right. Well, that's great, but 50 films-ish, half of them, I don't know. So about 25 art films a year?
Yeah,
but in
on
pandemic
average,
it's like 50?
On average, I think it is about a couple dozen at least. Yeah.
Couple of dozen
Yeah.
films a year, so 2 a month.
Right, and they're really short. So like a lot of these are under a minute or under a minute and a half or so, but they are all unique. There's no sequels, there's no series. Each one of them is a little bit different.
So you're a serial filmmaker.
A serial filmmaker where they're not anything alike with each one. But as far as I think I started. First videos I made, I think, were in 1999, and there's never been a time where the next one isn't coming up right now. Like there's always the next one planned for everything.
So you're obsessed, you're possessed, you just have to keep doing that.
I guess. I mean, I don't wait, but I think all artists have that in there. Mine just turns into, these things used to be, back when I was in school and before I started making videos, these would have turned into sculptures or paintings or something like that. And then they just kind of turned into video for various kind of reasons. But I think just any kind of thought, anything that could be like a poem or something like that, with a little bit of thought, ends up turning into a little video afterwards.
Why does everything turn into a video for you?
Because you can store it so easy. I mean, that's how it started. Like when I got out of school, I was making so much sculpture that I actually just swamped the apartment there, and I didn't know how to store it, and taking care of it was just a hassle.
Oh my God, so you're a serial sculptor
So
too.
then you make the video instead, and then you can keep everything on the hard drive, and you don't have to store it. You can make multiple copies, and the preciousness of it isn't there anymore.
And that's fascinating. So you're just a serial artist. And digital media is useful for you because it solves the storage problem.
Yeah, but I also think everybody's a serial artist, whether they recognize it or not. I'm always like pretty much. I've got a very wide definition of artist, but as far as I'm concerned, if I have an idea, then I just feel like, especially my way of working is really pretty fast and pretty lean there, that it takes almost less time to make it than it would be to reject the idea. So it's a time-saving measure too.
Time-saving.
Yeah.
So you're a comic. You're funny too.
Well, maybe. now I'll get nervous about it and what I'm saying. So that might be the end of that. So.
No, that's fine. No, I would have to disagree with you. That I don't think everybody. Maybe everyone's a serial artist, but I don't think everyone has the capacity to produce art at this furious rate.
Well, maybe, but is it any different than poets writing 2 poems a day or something? Or
2 poems a day would be that would compete with you.
Right.
But I don't see many people doing that.
Okay, well, I don't think poetry gets a lot of limelight anymore, so maybe they are, and we're just unaware of this there. But yeah, I don't know. I in a certain way, I don't think so, because I look at it and it's like, well, 52, that sounds like a lot, but it's only one a week. And I think, that's, I mean, coming up with one idea a week, and most of this stuff gets made and finished by noon. So it's not a big kind of time crunch. If I had more ideas, there'd be a lot more of them. So I'm always thinking, it's just like, man, I'm always actually feeling that I should be a little bit more prolific with it, because I really don't edit anything out. If I have the idea and it seems 60% formed, then I just go right into making it there. So it's not like I'm...
You're the reverse of me, because I'm a professional, accomplished procrastinator.
Okay. I'm the pre-crastinator. I want it done yesterday every time. So,
yes, you want it done restless. Like, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Right.
What's wrong with you? How do you manage to be a pre-crastinator?
Well, it starts by being self-employed, doing video for 10 years, because if you wait, then you won't be able to take on new work when it comes. So as soon as you can do it, you do it immediately, so your schedule opens up. But I found that with art, it's the same thing, that if you have one idea and if you don't work on it right away, you don't allow new ideas to come in, because you're thinking, oh, this is going to be the next film. So like for the next month, you're just thinking, oh, I know what I'm going to be doing. But if I sit there and I immediately make it, then there's that void, and I feel bad that I don't have any ideas, and then it kind of forces the new one to replace
So
it.
you're a new idea addict.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the new idea there. Yeah. New ideas and titling work. I think sometimes I make the videos...
And titling?
Titling. I think I make a lot of films just to have something to title. That's my favorite part, is naming the thing. So
really?
Yeah.
What? Why?
I don't know. I think it started early. I think it started with my first introduction to what modern art was, and you have Duchamp's Fountain, and it's a urinal, but it's really an art piece because he's got the title. He calls it Fountain, and then that's an art piece. And I thought, well, that's really, really pretty good. And so a lot of the early paintings and sculptures I'd make, and it would be one thing, and then the title would reverse the viewer's opinion of it. There'd be a change. And so I'd make all this, and then I found out nobody ever reads the labels. So they never see the titles, and they never get the piece. And then I thought, well, with a video, you could force them to read the title. Like before they see the movie, there it is, the title, or at the end, and then they can't walk away from it. They have to see it there. But I don't know. The titles always matter. Out of the whatever 500 films I've made, nothing is untitled or any of that. Maybe.
So what are you trying to do with the titles? You're trying to. Like Duchamp, like sort of make them see things in a different way, or
and
what?
sometimes it is like reversal, but a lot of times it's just, it almost seems like a great title justifies how bad the video could be, or just like you can make a video and you're kind of wishy-washy. It's like, does this mean anything? Is it worth the viewer's time? But the title can sometimes throw it over the top, where it's like, oh, but that's a perfect title, so it justifies it in this world. So,
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
So you like to precrastinate and you like to title things.
That's the thing. And I don't know, I think also that my favorite parts when I'm watching movies are the very beginning and the very end. So the shorter you make the film, the more beginnings and ends you can have in there. So I think that's also why I kind of like the short format, really short format, just because I think it allows more of that too.
So you don't go with the 3-part format, like
don't do that, and I don't really watch a whole lot of long series. All this Netflix, like series 6 of whatever, like that.
Oh yeah.
I don't get sucked in with that. A lot of times, every time I've watched a few of those, but if I go to Netflix and I look, and it's like, oh, the new series of, I don't know, Ozark came out, and if I can't remember where the last series left off, then I just won't play the new one, because it seems like it didn't really matter too much to me if I didn't really what's going on. So I can easily walk away from that kind of stuff. But
so is TikTok the greatest thing in your perspective?
I don't even know what TikTok is. I haven't even gone that, but I think it's a very short format, right?
Yeah.
But most of those are just like the single shot, and it's like, I'm guessing just like the fancy dance or the dog doing the funny thing and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's all right, but that is really the essence of like just the one-shot candid moment, which is totally fine with it. But video to me is still transformation. It's the one thing, and at the end of the 15 seconds, something else has to kind of change. There's still, even in a 30-second video, there still needs to be a bit of an arc going on there,
okay.
A little bit of a development. And I don't know if a lot of that TikTok is that way. I think it's pretty... What I've seen, a lot of them are pretty linear, and it might be cool, but it doesn't really have that storytelling element.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong. I just haven't visited. I'm commenting on something I haven't seen. But,
yeah, so the storytelling element, but do it quickly. So you're not into the long and slow.
No, well, here's the thing. Video is an immediate art form. It would be different if video didn't exist and we're still into film, because you have to... film's expensive. You got to plan everything out to not waste the film stock, and then you got to send it off to the lab, and weeks later you get it, and then it takes a lot longer to edit. Video, as soon as you take that shot, you can hit one button and play it back and see it. I mean, it can work as fast as real time is. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just like the idea of embracing that, and then it kind of sets it apart from a lot of other art forms. So I think things have to work fast with that.
I see. Okay. I see. So you are saying because digital media, you can immediately see it.
Right.
It sort of...
and immediately produce it. You can make it as quick. I made a film last year, which was just titled, it was longer to watch than to make. And it was putting the effort on the viewer that they were going to have to dedicate more time to watch the thing than it did for me to make it. And so it's just kind of a reversal. It's kind of passing the buck to the viewer thing. But it's that fast. It's really quick.
But, you're passing this off as kind of a technical thing that, digital video you can do very quickly.
Right.
But I sense... a kind of a passion, an obsession with this quickness.
Right. Okay.
Something that really sort of gets you going.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think that just that pretty much takes out the decision making of whether you should do it or not. So the simpler, again, like if it can be that fast, and now if you own a camera or if you own a computer, preferably both, but you can make it. It doesn't cost any money beyond that. Very few times do any of my videos for art cost over $10 to make. I mean, usually it's just $0. It's just out there making the shot. So once you have the initial investment, so there's not a money issue and there's not a time issue, then there's no real reason not to make it. So every half-witted idea you have then becomes, you give it the green light and you go ahead and you make it there. So and it's not always that way. I may come up, like maybe next week I come up with a longer format idea that takes longer to make, and so I'm not solely thinking that it has to be that short and that inexpensive, but it just turns out that way.
All right. Well, let's telescope around in time a little bit. Let's move around. So, how did you get into art? Did you always know you were going to be some kind of an artist, or?
I kind of grew up in a small town that was pretty far from art museums. I mean, my mom would take us up to I grew up in Central California, but when I was a little kid, we'd go to art museums in San Francisco, but that was quite a ways away. But I really didn't know what modern art is at all. My mom was into the old masters thing, so we'd go to the Legion Art or what is it, Palace of Fine Arts. But as far as contemporary, I had zero idea about it. And I learned about that in college there, and then got really into it. I mean, it started with that Duchamp thing and Jean Arp and these other things, because I never thought that I would. When you're going to school, there's always the kid that is the really good draftsman, and that kid's the artist, and everybody else isn't.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and then I start pulling off these books of these Dada artists, and that thing is like, well, I could do that. I mean, that looks like something I do, because I was always kind of tinkering with things. My mom and my dad would always be working on different kind of things. They wouldn't consider themselves artists, but they are. I'm saying right now, they are in different ways. But
were they artists? Or?
No, they weren't. But there was the artist tendency in there. So my mom.
I mean, your mom took you to museums, so
did take the museum. But I think what inspired me from my mom was that she would make a bigger project out of what was asked of her. So when you're in 4th grade and you're supposed to bring something in for the Halloween potluck, every other family just buys a bag of candy and sends it in and they share it. Yeah. And my mom would be staying up late with a hole punch and a pair of scissors, creating all these I don't know, like a tree ornament in the shape of a ghost. But she'd make 80 of them on one day, just like really compulsive, and it would take 2 days to do. And so I think that always inspired me. It's like, okay, here's the assignment, but you could do better than that. You can extend that. And then my dad, I got he's very do-it-yourself. So if he's going to build a gazebo and the plans call for this amount of wood of this kind and he doesn't have it, the gazebo is still going to get built, but it's going to be made out of whatever he's got, and then he's going to be able to do it himself. So
I see.
So I think those tendencies moved on, but it wasn't until I was in college and then I started learning about that, and I got really.
So did you go to college for art, or?
Yeah, Humboldt State University, and then I was a art major with a focus in teaching. But then I learned real quick that I couldn't be a teacher because I can't discipline anything. I can't discipline a cat or a dog. So you'd sit in the class and one child would always want more time. Like they'd see you as a father figure or something, but they would kind of cling on, and it wasn't in me to push them away. So I knew that would be my whole life there, and I wouldn't be able to lay down the law. So that was the end of the teaching thoughts.
Okay, so you became a full-time artist.
Well, yeah, I mean, I moved to Seattle and got a job at an art museum, like guarding art. So I did that, and then I taught myself to do the video thing, and then moved down to LA and learned to do video for professionally a couple of years, then moved back again. So that's where I'm at.
I see. So that's the journey.
Yeah.
So what is your ambition moving now in the other direction? You know, what is your desire?
That is a good question. I don't really have. So I have worked a little bit in like major motion pictures things. When I was still in my college town there, I worked for a couple months on the second Jurassic Park movie, like the smallest little role, like we were just helping out. And I just knew right away. I mean, it was cool, and you see famous people, and there's Spielberg and things, but there's an enormous amount of waste going on. Just amount of money and the amount of like just things built that are never used and just that turned into landfill after. And I just knew that that wasn't going to kind of work for me. So the short format films have never been like the bridge, the stepping stones to get me to that one other place, because I think that I'm still more connected to the visual arts than to motion picture things. So if it would be, it's just the art form to kind of keep me. I mean, the art's made for the art's sake, but I think that careers in art would probably still lean towards the fine arts, like something in the museum world or something, I think.
I see. Let's spend a little bit more time on that, that observation you made, that there's so much waste in the production of a big budget film.
Yeah.
And then that's the reverse of what you have been describing, how you do films.
Right.
Where it says no cost, no time, no excuse, you know. It's the opposite, huh?
Right, it is. And maybe it's just how you're kind of brought up. If you're brought up seeing just money, it takes money to spend, or you got to spend money to make money. If you're used to that and that's part of what you know, then you probably don't notice. I have a feel most of the crew there didn't think twice about the amount of stuff that was just getting wasted for that 1 week production in Humboldt County. But to me that was really pretty shocking, and it also just requires so many people. Like the films on that thing, very few people can just make the decision and go with it. It has to be okayed through everything in the world, and then there's just so much there's so much legal stuff and just so many behind the scenes things that it seemed like just such a huge, like it was hard to find the art in it. And like the end result is going to be art, and the people involved are artists, but it gets clouded over with just so much other kind of business stuff there that and whatever. And again, I was the very minor role in there, but even that you could just kind of see how much. I mean, I was working because we were just running the daily footage, so I was the projectionist assistant, and so they rented out like this beautiful Art Deco kind of theater there in Eureka. And I thought, well, they're just going to wind the film up in the projectors. No, they build their whole projection booth in the middle of the thing with their projectors and their incredibly expensive German glass that they send in there, and they build this projection booth that is fully functional and great, and after 2 weeks it all gets thrown out and just dumped out in the trash there. And I thought, man, just to make sure that there wasn't a hair in the gate of the footage, or like the footage came out all right. I thought, man, that's just so expensive there. Or you just see giant tree trunks that they'd bring in that were made out of plaster, and you'd think, well, this is going to be, wow, that's got to be a big profit. And it's like, no, we just bring on set in case we needed an extra tree in there. And then it wasn't needed, so it gets thrown out. And I thought, man, I don't know. None of this really computes to me. So.
There's sort of a Spartan quality, a lean quality to your thinking. And is this an aesthetic thing or an environmental thing, an ethical thing?
Well, I think a lot of it. I mean, a lot of visual art doesn't cost a lot of money. Some of it does, but then a lot of it could be just collage made out of everything. And that's been going on for, hundreds of years here. So that can be, a pencil and a piece of paper is about as cheap as it is, or a typewriter with a poem. I mean, a lot of art can be made for very, very little money there. It's just that the tradition of filmmaking seemed like it was always expensive because it was the equipment, the processing, all of that was inherently expensive. But digital stuff has changed all that right now, where you can make you don't even need the camera. You don't even need the phone anymore. I make plenty of films with just the computer right now. And so if you have one of that, or you can make one without the computer and just your phone. And so there's, I don't know, to me it does seem like it's attainable by anybody, and anybody can kind of work that way. And the best thing I love at the Walla Walla Festival there, because my films always seem quite a bit shorter and Spartan than everybody else. But my dream is that everybody in that audience thinks, why is this guy always here? Like, I could do that, because I want them to do that. I want them to go home and go, hey, look at that thing outside or whatever. That looks like one of that goofy guy's films or whatever. Or like, and then just take their camera out there and make it and just do it, because I don't know. I think that would be a much more fascinating way to communicate with everybody if everybody had some project they were working on or something to show. And it's like, yeah, this is what I do. But
I mean, the equivalent for me is architecture.
sure.
Architecture's expensive.
It couldn't be more expensive, I think. Yeah, it's probably the most expensive. Yeah.
Involves a lot of planning and production, so many
A
people,
lot of meetings.
a
Yeah.
lot of meeting, decisions,
Right.
so many crafts, so many trades,
Right.
and a
So
lot
how
of
do you feel about that,
compromise.
though? Because it might deviate from your initial inspiration there.
Yeah, that's the challenge of making buildings, because there's so much money involved. There are so many stakeholders.
Right.
And the client has a very particular vision, like studios or whatever. And it's a battle. And so a few handful of architects, will kind of become auteurs, and sort of force their vision
Right.
onto a big budget.
Right.
For the most, architects tend to work for commercial clients, and they do what needs to be done, and
Right.
make sure safety and so on. But there is the opposite also. There is a sort of a class of people who think like, you don't need architects to do architecture, like you say,
Okay.
to make films.
Right.
Most of the world makes housing without architects,
Okay. Yeah.
right? Most people
Sure.
build their own housing. Not here in the United States,
Right.
but if you go to India, or if you go to Brazil or most of Southeast Asia, the poorer people, they don't use architects. They
Right.
just make them
Sure.
like your dad.
Right.
The shack's gonna build, the tree house or whatever he's building
Yeah. Yeah.
is gonna get built, and they will see what's around and they'll do it yourself architecture.
Sure.
So there's the spectrum from one end to the other, right?
Right.
We have been building shelters for millennia, right?
Right.
Because as long as the human animal has been around, we have been building shelters. Architecture
Right.
is a very recent thing.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, architecture was just like a upper class gentleman's profession, making fancy facades for the special rich people. Most people, even in Europe in the 18th century, you just did your own house.
Right.
So it's more with legislation and sort of fire laws and sort of exiting requirements and
Right.
and kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
hygiene and so on in the 19th century with the industrial city,
Right.
when pollution and densities became so high and cities started to become unlivable,
Right.
that architecture emerged as a profession of life safety and structure and structural integrity and seismic loads, and it became a technical profession.
Right.
But that aside, I'm just interested in this. I'm just pointing out that there's a sort of a similar
Yeah,
debate.
there is, but most architecture is made for a client, right?
Of course.
And a client that has the end all say, right? Like they're the ones that finally sign off at the end, and it doesn't happen without them.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, I mean, or rather, they sign off in the beginning, ideally.
Oh, really? Okay.
They've got to approve the budgets and things like that. But they have a requirement.
Right.
But the requirements are generally functional. Like I need to be able to do this. This room needs to be able to do that.
Sure.
And it's got to be insulated from this, that, and the other.
Okay.
But how it looks and how it stands and how it's organized and how it performs
Right.
is still, in some ways, like making a film. Like the commercial films you do for art museums
Right.
and non-profits and
Right.
so on and so forth.
Sure.
It's not that different.
Right. And that's why I deviate myself. I don't call that percentage of the work that I do art for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I consider almost everything art, the stuff I do for hire is their project. So they can do whatever they want and we'll work with it. They know their institution better than I do. All the decisions there. But as soon as I send that email with that first cut and ask for their approval,
Mm-hmm.
that's the moment where I don't consider it my art at all. Like that,
Yeah.
I don't put my name on anything. Like I don't credit myself,
Why not?
because to me it's personal. That art is still so much about freedom that if I have to get somebody's approval, I feel like I've lost it as my own work then. Because everything else, I mean, maybe that's tyrannical, but all the other art, I don't have to ask anybody. It's like, this is the way it goes. But as soon as I send work off and say, is this okay? Whether they change it or not, I feel like I kind of abandoned it a little bit.
So true belief in the individual artist.
Well, yeah, and I understand that things like a major motion picture that can't happen. But my favorite directors, Hollywood directors, are the ones that tried to still make that happen. Like they fought and they just went head to head with the studio, everything, and they lived shortened lives probably for all that conflict.
So who are your Frank Garys? Who are these?
Well, in film or whatever, in cinema, it's all about Hal Ashby, and I always think of him. So Hal Ashby was like the essential kind of counterculture director, total auteur from the '70s. But when you read his interviews or any of the books or just listen to any of it, everything's combative against his vision versus the people with the money at the end and the influence there. So he was always at war. He still made great work with it, but I think a lot of times he still felt like it could have been better in certain ways or whatever. But I think so. That's it. On the other side, visual art, there again, it's always been Duchamp, and he was the one-man guy. I mean, that he just had his ideas, and most of the stuff he put out there, even his brothers would kind of would attack his work or kind of pull it from the exhibition or something, but he was always making his decision. I don't think Marcel Duchamp ever asked anybody if he had permission to do one thing or the other. I mean, these were his ideas. If you like it, that's great. Most people didn't like it at that time, but now it's held up as so influential for everybody, including myself. So.
No, he's both amazing artist.
Right.
So the conventional business school and systems process wisdom, like here in the university, we make a big deal out of collaboration.
Yeah. No, collaboration is it. And every time I make a video for somebody else, it's like, oh, we came together as a family, and they love all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm selfish with my own art there because it's tied into just being free. So,
Tied into being free sounds very libertarian.
Yeah, I'm not a libertarian at all there, but I do believe in that it comes down. And I'm not alone. I filmed a lecture here for the Henry a couple years ago where Martin Creed was up there asking, and almost every time somebody, I mean, he's kind of a squirrely speaker there, so it's hard to catch his drift with what he's saying. But almost every answer was he was making everything because he wanted to feel free. And I think that's what most artists want to do.
Feel free. What does that mean?
Well, I think to me it feels like an alternative. I think that when I was kind of growing up and everybody, when you're 10 years old, is like, what do you want to do for a living? And you want to do this. There's an expectation that you're gonna get married, you're gonna have the kids, you're gonna get the house, you're gonna work 40 days a week, you're gonna do this, and you'll retire, and then that'll be the time you can enjoy yourself. And I thought, well, that was terrifying, but it wasn't until I started to learn about art, and art became that alternative. And you meet dudes like Duchamp who never owned a house in his life and never drove a car, whatever. Like, it's just like, no, there could be this other focus, and he was living in a world that, I mean, he still lives in the reality of the world and the situation, but you can still change it in your own way, at least. And to me, that art is a way to kind of, I don't know, to have that alternative, to make things slightly more livable for yourself. So.
I agree with you. That whole sort of set narrative is terrifying.
Oh, yeah. And, that might be a generalization. I think everybody finds their own way to have their diversion in life. It doesn't have to be art, but if they're interested in a sports team, or if they're interested in, that becomes the diversion to escape the rest of that. I just wanted a little bit more of that, so I think that art was a way to kind of do it, and so I don't know. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I became an academic.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the least terrifying job in the world.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, what's the best part? See, I abandoned that profession because I couldn't discipline everything.
Because you couldn't discipline.
So what were the joys of being an
3 months off every summer.
All right. That's not...
to start with.
Okay, got it.
You described teaching as disciplining. At the university level, it's not that. I don't give a shit.
Right. Okay. That's a good place, and that's again freedom.
They're
That's
adults,
Right.
and they are here to step up to the plate,
Right.
and I'm here to sort of deliver content. And the way I look at it, I have a captive audience, and I can say whatever I want, and
Right.
they gotta listen.
Right.
And
Are
I
you
get
good about
paid-
distancing yourself, or if that one student is knocking at your office door every week? But
Yeah, totally. No, the thing you have to distance yourself from is the students who don't do well in class.
okay.
It took me a long time to realize it's not personal. It's
Sure.
not because of me.
Right.
It's just how it is.
Right.
You have a class. There are like if it's a 10-person class, let's just say for
Right.
easy. 2 of them are just doing really well, and they're on their road.
Right.
You're just in their way.
Right.
There are at least 2 in the class. You can do whatever you like. They're
Right.
gonna sleep through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It's the middle 6 who are like, okay, I'm here.
Right.
What's the least I have to do?
Right.
Can you interest me to do something more? And
Okay.
that's my audience.
Right. Right. I like that.
Yeah.
It's funny, that proportion almost sounds like when I go back and review my own films,
Yeah.
that I always feel like I got a slogan in my own head that I just say, okay, only 1 in 8 has to be great. So I always figure that if I make 8 films, 4 of them are unsuccessful. They're not there. I still put them out there anyway, but they're unsuccessful. So you got 4 of them that are successful. Half of that, they're good. And then you have half of that is great. So, and I thought, well, that's not a great percentage, but that's the same percentage that almost all of my favorite musicians, when you buy that album, there's that one great song on, there's great albums, but the average album, there's one great song, there's a couple other that are pretty good there, and there's half of them you never want to listen to. But I think that there's something about that balance of just 1 in 8 is pretty good. So, it seems like you got 2 in 8 that's going to go on to without your teaching, and then you'll probably teach a few of those middle ones in there to kind of join it. So your percentage is probably doing better than mine is.
I don't know. I think and this is probably what you were hinting at earlier also when you go back to see your films.
Right.
Like I've learned in life from so many years of teaching that I don't know when I'm doing my best teaching.
Oh yeah.
Because often I'll find, man, I really rocked that lecture, and I was really on point today.
Right.
And there's no feedback. People
Right.
are like, "Yo, good, it was fine."
Yeah, yeah.
And then sometimes somebody will come back to me like 2 years later, and they'll say, "Oh man, that seminar,
Right.
that was really good." And I'm like,
Right.
"I don't remember that at all."
Right.
So you don't really know when you're doing the good work.
And that's why I never edit out what I think are my worst ones. Because again, the Walla Walla Crush is the same thing. I send everything to Warren. I send him whatever 50 films. And there's like half a dozen that I think, oh, these are so much better than the rest. And they're never the ones that are chosen.
Really?
And most of the time they're chosen as like, man, if I was actually only going to send a couple of these, it would not be this. But I always wonder. So for a couple weeks, I'm wondering, it's like, well, this film is in here. Like, why this? And then I go and I see how it fits with other programming. And then it's like, okay, that makes sense because it's a component for the hour-long block and it fits and it bridges these 2 videos and it makes sense with it. But a lot of times that's the thing. There's not a good consensus of what somebody thinks is great in that. And the same thing with me. Like, I take that like my favorite director there, Hal Ashby, he made 7 great films in the 70s, and I'll watch a bunch of YouTube videos where people are ranking them, and they're never anywhere close to my ranking. And it's like, well, look, we're both fans enough that we're making the video, and we're spending the time talking about how much we love this work, but we couldn't be more off about what we love about it. But the thing that I've found that an exercise that I've done is every couple of years I go back and I write commentary on those films, what I can remember about doing the films that I made 2 years ago. And I'll see the next one in line and it's like, oh my God, what am I going to think about? I don't even want to look at this. And then I'll force myself to write it and I'll find some new kind of component that sounds really pretty good, and it's like, man, I could write a dissertation on this. This is really pretty good. And it usually inspires the next little video that I make on some things. So sometimes it just takes that time to kind of get the fresh eyes, I think, look back on there. But yeah, I don't know. I also think that like all of Neil Young's stuff there, it's a gift, like I was mentioned before. He says that it's a gift, and who am I to judge whether it's not? So go ahead and make it, put it out there. If it finds an audience, fine. Maybe it doesn't even find a wide audience, but that one person likes it a lot, and then it really matters to them. So I'm just like, well, you know, what's the big deal? Like, put them all out there. I'm not worried about whatever diluting the brand. I don't have a brand or whatever. Like I don't have a wide audience there, so put it all out there, and I don't have to be very protective about that. So.
No, but that's interesting. See, on the one hand, you are so dedicated to the idea of personal freedom and being able to simply do it. But on the other hand, it's, you know, fascinating to recognize that in the end, the work is out there in the world.
Right.
And in the world, it's get tossed around who knows how.
Right.
And how somebody else sees that is as much dependent on who they are, what they're doing, and what their frame of viewing is, as it is dependent on, you know, the intentions of the artist.
Right. And I used to worry about that quite a bit. I'm thinking that I was going to be taken out of context or misunderstood with this. Now, one, I don't think it's not like the world is waiting with bated breath to see my next film. Like, it's just out there. It's just waiting. But I also think that the questions an artwork brings up are more important than whatever the answers I have. It's very rare that I think I have this profound thing that I have to say to the world there. A lot of times it's just pointing attention at an issue there as a kind of conversation piece there, or allowing the viewer to kind of interpret it, not in a very vague way. A lot of the artists that I film in fine arts, they really don't want to talk about their work because they want to keep it so open-ended that it doesn't direct the audience in any specific way, that they're free to come up with what they want. And they almost never talk about what it's about when you ask them. And it makes it frustrating to make the video about it, but it's just a common occurrence there. And so I definitely have, is like, the film is about this, but you're able to kind of have a couple different perspectives on it then. So, and I don't mind if people disagree with it.
So let's talk a little bit more about your content and aesthetics.
Right.
So you say, you know, idea strikes you and you just make it.
Right.
So what is the sort of palette of ideas that you're interested in? Like, is it mostly, you know, human dynamics? Is it planetary things? Is it, you know, what is?
You know, they're not films that came from theater, so I wouldn't think that the whole kind of human interpersonal, like, or dialogue films. Early on there were scripts and there was actors and they were saying it, but I haven't done that in quite a while, so I wouldn't think it's that human drama kind of thing. I think it's really a mix of, a lot of it does have to do with the process of the filmmaking again, and I think that's kind of a modern, maybe postmodern appreciation with it, where we take the work and the actual production and the viewing of it is a process and is kind of the subject in its own. But there's still a smattering of just political stuff that I put in there. There's some a lot of kind of strange portraits of myself, so there is some identity stuff, but it's usually in a very kind of non-specific way. But I think it's just anything. A lot of it tends to revolve around the artist-viewer relationship, and it's just something that I've always been interested. I think because I was a guard for 7 years. Yeah,
guard?
At the museum, a guard. Yeah. So at the Seattle Art Museum, you see people looking at art quite a bit, and something about that I think probably seeped in a little bit. So a lot of my my work deals with that kind of component. So, and a lot of times the reversal of that too, by somehow making the audience the subject of the video, or the artist becomes the audience, one of these things. And it's a hard thing to explain without seeing it, but there's a lot of that in the films.
What are you trying to say about that artist-viewer relationship?
I guess that it's just like an experience, and that it's that old saying that the art isn't really completed by the artist. It takes the viewer to complete it, so that you need that exchange in it. But I think that there's an opportunity to play with that and reverse the role sometimes. So
Okay. And what is the aesthetics of your work? What are you interested in? I mean, is the framing of the shot, the sort of composition of it, the sort of movement of the camera, is that an important thing, or are you mostly focused on the subject?
It's pretty bare bones kind of thing. It's not snapshot, I don't care. I mean, things are composed well, but when I'm thinking about it, I think that a lot of times I don't want it to look, like I said, I don't want it to look like a pharmaceutical commercial. I don't want it super slick. I want it to look like it was handmade in there, and especially the documentary work. I tend to be against the trend. A lot of people now are shooting documentaries, and they're trying to make them so cinematic. So they shoot with that shallow depth of field, with the backgrounds out of focus, and the focus. Now the problem with that, if you're shooting live events and you're trying to anticipate where your focus has to be, it doesn't really work in the real world, because you need time to be able to anticipate that. So anytime I see that in a documentary, I know that it's not being done off the cuff. Like it's like, let me set the focus, and you walk down the classic shot of somebody in a library walking down there, and they stop right in front of the book that's in focus and pull. I mean, you see in Frontline on PBS. I mean, these are great shows, but it's fake. And anytime I see that, or the other shot where somebody just walking down the street, and it's like, okay, but you got a guy with a camera and probably another guy with a boom. Why aren't you looking at them right in front of you? But they always have to pretend like they're not seeing anything. I hate these shots. So my thing is to shoot super deep depth of field. And I always say that if you had a video camera and you were interviewing George Washington, wouldn't you want to be able to read the books on his shelf in the background? So to me, the more information you see, the better document it is. And it's also saying that the artist's studio is important to them. It's in situ, I think is the term. So the artist in their place is more important to me than making it look like it's a very beautiful image, because you're just focusing on the speaker. And a lot of times with the art, it's just like their art's on the background. Why am I blurring out their art? The art is the subject too. I mean, like the art and the artist should be equally important. So if I can shoot the widest depth of field I could and show everything in focus, I would do that. I kind of think that if video cameras started out and they could only shoot with that shallow depth of field forever, then the world would be clamoring to invent a lens that kept everything in focus. And now everybody would be shooting that, because we haven't been able to do that before. But the reverse was happened. So I always feel like I don't want the subject or the viewer thinking, oh, that's a beautiful shot in my documentary. I want them to all their focus on the artist and what they're talking about there. I don't want to distract them with my cinematography. That's for documentary. The other stuff is fun, but a lot of that, again, it's usually just my hands in front of the lens doing something with some little scrap of paper or something else. So it's not a cinematic kind of thing there. A lot of it's black and white, because again, I just take color. If color isn't relevant to my story, then it just gets pulled out. So the only thing in the frame is what I think is important in there. So everything else has to justify it. So half of them are black and white, half of them are in color.
I see. What is usually the equipment you're using for your own films?
Oh, I mean, I got half a dozen cameras. A lot of them are totally out of date, but I'll just choose whichever works best with it. So I'll use like the kind of whatever like the old kind of camcorder kind of thing in the documentary stuff, because the zoom lens can go from serious wide to really close. It doesn't shoot great in low light, so sometimes I have to kind of boost that up. But then other things, if I don't need if I have more time to do and I can set my focus, I might use like a mirrorless camera there too. But I don't get real hung up. A lot of times it's just a decision, especially the microphones. It's almost like whatever one's closest I grab, because they all have a different kind of tone. But sometimes I'll look and it's like, well, I haven't used this one in a while, and so all my narration won't sound the same, so I'll use that just so that it'll sound different than the last video that I made. But a lot of it is just kind of decisions that I make. The one thing about equipment, the short answer is I use the most reliable equipment I have. I have no patience for anybody on a film set say, oh, we gotta wait, my camera's overheated, we gotta wait. It's like, no, that camera then gets thrown in the dumpster, and then we go and we buy a camera that doesn't overheat. There shouldn't be any kind of delay in the process with that. So all the equipment has to totally not let me down.
And most of your films are just you, or do you work with a lot of actors often?
No, well, in the beginning there was a lot of scripted ideas, but I was working with a lot of people. An art museum has lots and lots of artists working there, and there are people that are willing. They don't think twice if you say, hey, let me shove this camera in your face and pretend to do this. They get it. It's like, well, it's art, we'll do it, no question. So when I no longer was working at the museum and I was just self-employed, I kind of lost that quick access to all the actors. And I'm not somebody that is, so the films cost no money, but they have a budget and no money. And I can't ever ask anybody that is a experienced artist that I'm not working with to come in and donate their time. And I definitely will never ask anybody to audition for no pay. So at the art museum, there's always a way that you could get everything ready, and even on your lunch break, you got 15 minutes, you go get the guy, you take your shot, and you do it, and then you just get a couple shots every week, and you put it together. But the thing is, it should never take, if you're asking people for help for free, it shouldn't take more than an hour to do. I mean, some of them, like, there's been a couple videos that it took all day to shoot, but most of it, that's what they always say that the most important thing is to feed your crew. I say the worst thing, never feed the crew. Because if I show up and somebody asks me to be in their film and I'm as an actor, which I'm not a very good actor, but occasionally this happens, and I show up and if I see that big platter of food out there and the big table, I'm like, oh God, we're gonna be here all day. And it is like the shooting takes forever and all the decisions haven't been made and you are there all day. My friends kind of know if we're gonna be in Aaron's film, he's going to have everything ready. It's going to take an hour, and then we'll go get drinks afterwards or something, right. and that's it. But it's going to be all business for this little part, and then go back and have fun. But it's not going to take a long time.
Again, highly Spartan, efficient.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. I absolutely hate wasting people's time at all. So when I'm working on
you hate wasting people's time.
I do that. So I will spend, like the day before, I'll spend 4 hours in preparation to save 10 minutes the next day of somebody else's time there, just because I absolutely hate having anybody wait. Like the gear should be up there when the person arrives, and we should be able to go through with it. Just because I think I've seen other times where it's like, oh, we forgot this when we got there. Oh, can you drive back downtown and get I don't have a whole lot of patience for that. But I don't know. Maybe that just has a fear of letting people down. I don't know.
Okay. So as we start moving towards the end here, what would you pick as your favorite 2-3 films? How many films have you done total so far? I mean, not commercial.
Right. For mine, I think of art films about 300. I think.
300. Yeah.
Again,
Which
very
ones?
very short. There.
Yeah, I know. But which have been memorable experiences for you?
Well, I guess probably I always go back to the early ones, because if the early ones weren't a good time, there wouldn't be later ones, because then you just wouldn't do it again. So like some early films that I made, actually shooting in the museum there. There's one that I always go back to, one for nostalgia's sake, but it was called My Captive Audience, and it was basically about a director, a friend of mine played essentially me, but he goes fishing with his entire audience. So every shot you see with him, he's either driving or he's in a little aluminum boat out here in Lake Washington. And every time the camera switches angles, it's a different person in the boat, but his conversation keeps going like it's one continuous person. and it meant a lot to me at that time. It was about just coming to grips with it's okay not to pressure yourself to be successful with the artist. I mean, but it also involves so many of my friends, and I made it I don't know 20 years ago. So when I see it and I see all these people and see them 20 years ago, it's very nostalgic for me. But I also think I'm totally self-taught with the video. When I look at the video right now, I'm like, man, you know, the concept and the script of that is really pretty sharp, but I really had the most basic equipment and basic knowledge of how to make the video. And it was still good enough, and it's enjoyable, but I think I could make it a lot slicker right now, but I never will. It means too much to me. It's like, this is the kind of film that somebody would say, well, you should remake this. This is all right. But to me, that would be disrespectful to everybody that was involved with the original one. Plus, I'm a different person right now than I was when I was, whatever, 20 years old or something, making that. So that one sticks in my mind there. The first one, Warren ever screened there, extra credit. You know, when you made films in the short films in like 2000, that was before internet streaming, or like good internet streaming. So YouTube, it just wasn't there. If you wanted to see short films, you had to go to a film festival.
Right.
So I made this little short film. It was like the first one that I ever had the idea of, and I bought the equipment necessary because I needed now a computer that could actually make real titles. Before, I was just push and play on one VCR and record on the other, and I was dubbing it like old cassette tapes to make my films. This one, I made the investment and turned out the way I liked it. It was still insecure because I didn't know anything about it, but it ended up going to almost every festival that I've shown it in, and Warren saw it and chose it for the Bumbershoot Film Festival there. But that was like the first inkling that maybe the short film thing was going to work better for me than the visual art stuff. So I think that was it. And these are 20 something years. That movie was like from 2001, I think. So it's quite a while ago. And more recently, you know, it's just little things that I like that I think that haven't gotten any traction or almost any viewership. I made one a while ago. I noticed on Netflix, if you go to the little main menu thing, it always says, because you watched this film, because you watched this, you might like it. And they show about 6 or 7. And so I noticed it just said, because you watched Cool Hand Luke. And there was like 7 little videos that it was recommending. So I learned that I could record my computer screen without a camera just by using the QuickTime record button. So I watched Cool Hand Luke again, and then I went and basically used a little cursor on the desktop and pointed to every one of their selections and used a line from Cool Hand Luke as the synopsis for that film, the film it was representing. And I thought, well, you know, using one film to describe another one, I love this. And I love that it was made without a camera and all this stuff. It just hasn't gotten any attention with anything else, but I don't know. That one springs to mind. It's like, if I saw somebody else make that, I think, damn, I wish I made that film. So
Right. I mean, the one director who makes a big deal about his fights with the studios and trying to make his vision of a film is of course Francis Ford Coppola, describing Godfather and Godfather 2.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, those films are elite kind of films there. I think was always the struggle. He came in at a time there where like the studio was kind of given a little bit of leeway, and he had a lot of control because they really wanted him to do it. So he had a little bit more flexibility, but it still comes down to sooner or later, if you don't have the final cut, then your film can kind of get taken away from you there. And again, Hal Ashby struggled with that all the time. And I wondered, because sometimes he's complaining about them taking over and making changes to the films that I consider the best films ever made. So on one hand, I look there and I'm all, hey, Hal, I'm with you. Yeah, fight the power. But maybe they were right, because this is a perfect movie. So like maybe your version wouldn't. I mean, how could it have been better than this? So I kind of wonder. I wish I would have been there to see what got edited out or what the fight goes on. But again, a lot of those films that he made there, they, to me and to a lot of people right now, are held dear, but they took a long time to become successful. I think he died thinking a lot of these were failures there, which is uncommon. I think a lot of the art that I appreciate has severe, I think the artists are really insecure with it all
Yeah,
going
they
on there.
always are.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite artwork of all time is The Grapes of Wrath. I mean, I grew up in Steinbeck country, so you're forced to read it in grade school.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably the only kid in the class that enjoyed reading it, and I read it almost like every other year. I read it, and it is a perfect work of art. They published a book of his writings, his journal he kept when he wrote it, and it's called Working Days. And it is nothing but total insecurity through everything else. Like him writing just worried about everything, didn't think it was going to work. Like a little note that's like, oh, Carol, his wife, is like came up with the title. I think it's still okay. And it's like, yeah, it's perfect. It's great. All this is. And I thought, man, you're writing that. And then when I go back and read the text and read that chapter he's worried about, I can't believe there was any kind of insecurity. It just seemed like it was a perfect written thing. But I think, again, everybody's got that in there and I don't know when it comes to a point where you finally accept it. I don't know how much critical praise you need before all of a sudden you believe that it's actually worked out. But
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question. At one point, I was running our lecture series, and I invited, Rem Koolhaas, the famous architect who made the Seattle Library. He was building the library those days.
Okay.
So I invited him to lecture, big auditorium, a lot of people, 800, 900 mobbed event. We're paying him good money for 2 hours, for $5,000.
Yeah.
Nice dinner to follow, and so on and so forth. But he was a complete asshole. He was being very rude to me and shouting at the projectionist and this, that, and the other.
That's heartbreaking.
And I thought, wow.
Right.
Why,
Yeah.
And so later on dinner, I put other people next to him, and I sat on the other side.
Right.
And his partner, his junior associate partner, came and sat next to me, and he said, Vikram, this is not personal.
Okay.
Rem just he's so nervous and scared every time he has to lecture.
So it's a defense mechanism.
So it's a defense mechanism. It's like, here he is, the number one architect in the world.
Yeah.
And he has to just do a lecture to students of architecture, who have already lapped him up, right?
Yeah.
And think he's the greatest.
Right.
But he's shared skitless.
Wow, yeah. And it's surprising because I used to work for doing projection at the art museum, and there were some independent filmmakers that were so braggadocious. I mean, it's part of their shtick. So every time they see you, just like you think they have no insecurity in the world. But then I'd be up there with them, and the audience is down there, and the film's running, and just literally shaking, like their hands shaking, just like sweating bullets, just freaked out about the response down there. And I was shocked. I thought, of all people, I can't believe that you're worried about this. But I guess it's a good bluff with that. But,
I mean, it's the thing. I mean,
do you like that library? I like that library.
I love that
it's
library.
great. And when I first went in there, I'm like, man, this is the best part of like downtown. This is it. And I haven't been there recently, so I haven't seen if everything's kind of weathered right, but that's unfortunate that he was like, but maybe still a nice guy.
No, it's not.
Maybe you need to go fishing with him in a boat or something like that.
Maybe.
And would have been all right.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think people who try hard and really want to do something in the world, you've got to be insecure about it. Otherwise, you're not pushing yourself.
That's totally true. Yeah.
Because you're taking a risk. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You have experienced failure at some point or the other.
Right. I can definitely see that. Yeah. And because there really isn't this is why I don't do sequels and things, because there isn't that risk. There isn't that like possibility of failure. You knew that like you're only going to remake films that you think turned out right in the first place. So there's already kind of a framework for the success of that. And to me, like I always want to kind of start from scratch and try to make a film in some different way, and so I never know what's going to go on. I've got the luxury of not having a big audience, so I don't have to worry about letting people down, and nobody's buying this stuff. It's really just there, and what's the worst? If somebody didn't like it, it took 20 seconds of their time, and then they can go on to something else and forget about it. So.
Well, with that, Aaron, I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and have this conversation with me.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Architecture Talk. This is your producer, Mary Lee. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and if you did, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes or Spotify. We would also love to hear from you if you have any suggestions on new topics or guests. You can always reach out to us on our website, Facebook, or Instagram. Thanks again, and until next time, this is Architecture Talk.